It's story time with Rasheen Peer. Today, our story is Duppy at Christmas, adapted by Peggy Campbell, from the book Stories from Nearby and Far Away, Year 3, Term 1. Let's find out what happens. One night at Christmas time, Grandfather called his grandchildren to come to him. He wanted to tell them some Duppy stories. Rufus and Gussie had heard many Duppy stories from their grandfather. They loved the stories and believed all of them. When Grandfather came to the end of his first story, he took up his pipe to get a smoke, but there was no tobacco in it.
"I can't tell any more stories if I don't get a smoke," said Grandfather. "Rufus, you and Gussie run to the shop and get some tobacco for me."
Since it was Christmas time, Rufus and Gussie were glad to go on the road. They saw some other boys going to the shop and they had a wonderful time on the road. When they reached the shop, they heard people talking about Miss Mattie. Miss Mattie had died 2 weeks before. The people believed that Miss Mattie's Duppy was walking around at night in a long white dress. She had frightened a lot of people. Rufus and Gussie were frightened. They didn't know how they were going to get back home. Rufus bought the tobacco and they started to run back to their yard. They moved as fast as lightning down the road. "I hope Miss Mattie won't trouble us," Gussie shouted as they ran. Soon they passed the last street light at the corner. The rest of the way was full black. There were lots of shadows. Rufus was very frightened now. He was running and looking around in the shadows for any sign of Miss Mattie. Just around the corner, a big banana tree was growing by the road. The shadow of the banana tree was right in the road. As the boys came around the corner, the shadow of the tree started to move. The boys nearly dropped dead. Rufus's eyes nearly jumped out of his head. "Help!" Gussie shouted. "Duppy! Miss Mattie, oi!" Rufus shouted. He dropped the tobacco and the two of them ran bawling down the road. They did not stop till they reached home. Grandfather heard the boys bawling and coming. They were so frightened that they could not talk. He had to rub them down with wipe rum first. After this, the boys told him how Miss Mattie's Duppy nearly killed them at the corner. Grandfather laughed. "Ha ha ha ha. That must be the shadow of the banana tree moving," he said. "A tree like that used to be there when I was a boy, and the same thing happened to me one night." He put his hands on the boys' heads. "You must not believe the Duppy stories are so much," he said. "Maybe I should stop telling them to you." "But we like them," said Rufus and Gussie. "We just have to tell ourselves that they're only stories." The end.